Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, somewhat in that order. We don't care when you're listening. We're just glad that you are. It's the day after Championship Saturday. You can tell from my misguided introduction that it was a long day yesterday, no matter whether you were home, at the stadium, both, as I was. It was a long day. It was a successful day. Congratulations to Donna Polk and Jed Bell and anybody involved with the football committee from Jim Comegys down. A very successful day. Things basically ran on time. The 6 o'clock game started right at 6 o'clock. And if it needed to, it probably could have started earlier from what I could tell. And so a very successful day. It started out with an overtime game to kick it off. That was won without a point being scored. More on that in a second. Game two, there was a Class 1 champ crown that we can already predict is not going to defend its Class 1 championship next year. Game three, a running clock blowout between two Kent County teams as one coach defeats his alma mater and his former college assistant. And game four, two generations on the sideline coaching a third generation on the field to their first state title since 1984, when that first generation coach on the sideline was new to the Delaware scene. And who had any idea he'd still be around, still be active, and still be coaching. So, Marty, it was a great Saturday. Congratulations to you on becoming a grandfather again. That was
Thank you.
That's what Championship Saturday was all about for you, for the most
That's
part.
right. That's right. I got to meet the new granddaughter and trying to mix in the games as well. So it was it was a busy Saturday.
So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
You know, as you said, it never gets old holding your grandchild for the first time.
No, it doesn't.
Yesterday. So congratulations on that. So anyway, let's start with the unified game at 10:30. It was Caesar Rodney versus Newark Charter School. Caesar Rodney has never won a unified flag football title. Newark Charter School won the first two flag football titles, what seems like way back when, back in the mid 2010s. It was a 1-point difference at halftime, which everybody expected. In fact, Marty, I told a lot of people this might be the best game of the four that we saw at Delaware Stadium on Champion Saturday, and it pretty much turned out to be true. A couple other good ones, but they were tied at 32 at the end of regulations. And now here's how it works in flag football. You get 4 possessions from midfield. So you basically got to go 20 yards, and not possessions, I shouldn't say, 4 plays from midfield, which is where the first down is in the normal game. So it's similar to the high school. Instead of 10 yards, it's 20 yards, but you get 4 plays. You either score, or in this case, if you don't score, the amount of yardage you get is very important, because that could come down, and it did in this situation, to determine the final outcome. So Caesar Rodney gets the ball first. They're only able to gain 4 yards. And so that means basically, if you're Newark Charter, you need to get 5 yards. And as soon as you do, you're the state champs. Well, Newark Charter got the ball back. And thanks to a tremendous defensive effort by Caesar Rodney, they actually went backwards on their first couple plays. And then on fourth down, they weren't able to get to the plus 5 yards on the other side of the field that would have given them the state championship. And so the Caesar Rodney sideline erupted. And it was a wonderful win for head coach Sky Boris, who has been involved in the Caesar Rodney Unified program since it started, one of the initial programs to be in the DIAA competition. They play football, they play basketball, they do track and field. And so it was a great way for the day to start. Otherwise, with other than the DIAA kind of thinking to themselves, okay, we still got 3 more games to go, and this one already went longer than we expected it to go. But they caught up.
I'm glad you cleared that up, because I was watching it, and of course there's no audio because there were no announcers for the game. So when it ended, I'm sitting there thinking, did I miss something? Why is this over? And why is Caesar Rodney celebrating? So now we know. Okay. So it's a yardage situation at the end of the game.
Yeah. And so it's one of those things that even I had to look up the rules. Not today. I knew it for today, or that day, not yesterday, but a couple games ago, then I was managing the game as a member of the DIAA Unified Committee, and had to look up to make sure I knew what the rules were for overtime. And so just a tremendous game. And Marty, people may not understand this if they don't, not around unified sports. It's for people with and without disabilities playing on the same team. And what has happened over the years is sometimes you have a game that is won, and it's won because the unified partners, who are the peers without disabilities, dominate the game.
Yeah.
Not the case here. I didn't keep exact stats. I always just try to keep a general sense of who's doing most of the big plays and most of the scoring. And it was basically an even split between unified partners and Special Olympics athletes. And it was also an even split between the two teams. Both scored using unified partners, both scored using Special Olympics athletes, both picked up first downs using both as well. So it was one of these games that there shouldn't be any complaints the way it was played. They played a win. There's no question about that. You could see that not only in the celebration by Caesar Rodney, but in the post-game disappointment on the Newark Charter side.
Yeah.
I mean, these are student athletes like any other student athlete. You're at Delaware Stadium. You're at the pinnacle of your athletic career, no matter what the sport is. And to lose is disheartening. But head coach Jake Schneider of the Newark Charter School Patriots did a wonderful job. He's coached that team since I think he told me he was the coach of the second time they won the first of those two state championships. So he's been around for a while, and it's been a while. They lost one other time at Delaware Stadium. So that was actually their fourth trip to Delaware Stadium, third time that they've won. So congratulations to Caesar Rodney and head coach Sky Barris for an outstanding
season. And how cool for them. So with the football team struggling as much as they have the last couple of years, pretty cool to bring a state title there in football. I mean, it's a different kind of football, but hey, it's a state championship nonetheless.
And both these teams had breakfast that morning. They had send-offs at their school, just like their varsity tackle teams would have. And so it's just incredible how they've embraced the unified flag football, not only at those two schools, but statewide. All right, so then 12 o'clock rolls around. Kickoff didn't happen because of the unified game going to overtime, but it happened shortly after. Those who aren't familiar, there are two turf practice football fields within 20 yards of the stadium. And so basically what the DIAA committee does is they make sure that the teams are warming up on those practice fields. Each team gets a field, which is actually more than you would get in the stadium. You only get half the field in the stadium. And there's goalposts. There's the whole shebang. It's where the University of Delaware football team practices. So basically when you get over to Delaware Stadium, they give you, I don't know what it is, 10, 15 minutes to acclimate yourself with the inside of that stadium. But your legs should be stretched. The ball should have been thrown around. That type of thing should all be done. It was Laurel versus St. Elizabeth. It was the rematch of the 2021 game that happened last year. It was the last game last year, played in a just miserable weather. In fact, a lot of people said it was the most miserable a state championship game has ever been. This was picture perfect weather for December. I was on the field, very, very little wind. Temperatures were cold like you would expect, but you weren't freezing. There were players that, had their jerseys on, no long sleeves or anything underneath it. And same with the fans. So it was Marty, I think I texted you from the sideline. I was behind the Laurel team and I was looking at them and thinking, these guys are as big as some of the Class 3 teams, just in the pure size of their ability. And so I would have bet right then if you had said me, John, give me the points and $1,000. I would have said this is going to be a 3-touchdown win. It wasn't. It was 14-7 at the end of the third quarter. Chris Character scores, but the PAT is blocked, which is huge at that point. Huge because of the struggle that both teams have had to score at that point. So it was 14-13 Laurel. Laurel responds with an 11-play, 54-yard drive to go up 21-13, and then St. E's fumbles and Laurel runs it back basically to put this game away to the final score of 28-13. So we thought this game could be a blowout. It was by far a blowout. I think the competition committee that put Laurel up into the next class next year was sweating for a while there when it was 14-13 because it would be even tougher to explain why you sent the team that lost to one team up to the next level. I don't disagree with the move, and we'll talk more about the realignment at the end of this, but I think they were sweating it out a little bit. But it was so we had an overtime game and really a game that was much closer than 28-13 and much closer than a lot of people thought it would be.
Yeah, it's funny. It's actually a 1-point difference from last year's score. Last year was 28-14. This year's 28-13, but this year was a closer game. I tell you what, when you were talking about taking the bet on Laurel, when St. E's fumbled the first offensive play of the game, I thought, oh my God, this is going to be over quick. And then of course they take it right in for a touchdown. They get another touchdown the second quarter. It's 14-0. At that point, you just think they're just going to run this. They're going to run this down St. E's throat for the rest of the day. St. E's defense really stiffened, and I give them a ton of credit. They did a yeoman's job on everyone but Kylese Wilson, but they did it between like the 20s again. They didn't let Laurel into the end zone. And, you talk about the kick at the end. The interesting thing is that Patrick Bell, who ended up blocking the kick, was called for offside on the play before it when Cole Soto's kick went through the uprights. So it would have been 14-14, but because of, and I don't know the machinations of how this happened, but the play was blown dead when he was offside. I'm guessing he must have made contact with the Saini player, because normally you can decline the offside and
Right.
take the play. Now the interesting thing, and I got a lot of DMs about this last night, was why didn't Mike Lemon go for two? I actually didn't have a problem with that. That Laurel defense, when you're packed in tight like that, I don't know that they would have been able to get in anyway. They had been shutting down Kasim Benson for most of the day. Character got a lot of the yardage for St. Elizabeth, but I didn't have a problem with him going for the extra point. At that point, it's on the offensive line, and you've got to block. And Patrick Bell getting in there and a fantastic job of blocking that at that point. And then Laurel goes on, like you said, that 11 play, they ate up almost 6 minutes of the clock, just a textbook drive to try to close out a championship. For Laurel, Kylese Wilson was the guy, 29 carries, 190 yards and a touchdown. Xavier Limehouse and Tate Walls combined for 60 plus yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. I love the fact for the second year in a row, they bottled up Kasim Benson, 19 carries, 65 yards. Tate Walls and Patrick Bell, 12 tackles, combined for 12 tackles. Bell had the only sack, and of course he blocked the extra point. For St. Elizabeth, it was interesting. They only threw 2 passes in the first half of the game, and only one of them was completed, and it was completed by Chris Character on that 22-yard sort of trick play. But I was surprised they never tried to get more going through the air. And they eventually did in the fourth quarter. Cole Soto sort of started putting it together, and it was because they were calling the pass plays. So I thought he had, in the fourth quarter, he was 6 for 7. He had a touchdown. Of course, they had the fumble at the end, which is just, you can't blame anyone for that except the Laurel defense, which is just phenomenal. Chris Character, 10 carries, 94 yards, 1 receiving TD. He also threw the touchdown pass. And then you had Patrick Bell, of course, stripping Soto, and then DeMontre Smith going 45 yards for the score. But this was, I tell you, I for the fourth quarter, I had no idea who was going to win this game.
Yeah,
I mean, it just seemed like last year when it was 28-14 and it wasn't a big margin, it just seemed like St. Elizabeth was never going to win that game. It just never felt like it.
Right.
This felt completely the opposite. It really felt like the momentum had shifted. And then again, all the credit in the world to Laurel for that 11-play drive that just seemed to drive a stake through the heart of St. Elizabeth. But even then, they got the ball, they started to move it, and then, of course, the fumble and the score. So I thought St. Elizabeth did a phenomenal job. Eric O'Neill had a huge game with 16 tackles. He was the district defensive player of the year. Stephen Goodman had 11 tackles. I thought St. Elizabeth's defense did a phenomenal job yesterday. Laurel's just, they out-Laureled them. I mean, they both like to run the ball, and Laurel did it better in the end. So congratulations to the Bulldogs, and good luck in 2A.
Yeah, they'll be going up. St. Elizabeth finished their season 11-2. The 2 losses were to Caravel, which they won't have to worry about in the playoffs next year, and Laurel, which they won't have to worry about in the playoffs next year. And I haven't taken a good look at the roster next year, but you would certainly have to think that St. Elizabeth is one of the favorites to win it all again next year. So again, congratulations, as you said, to Joey Jones. He did what you have to do. He was 2 for 2 in Class 1. The good and the bad of that is he's going to get put up. But I think he's looking forward to that, and he said that.
He did.
That's where they belong, at least for the next 2 years, and then it'll get reevaluated from there. So, all right, this day and age, we all think our iPhones are great cameras. That is until you see a team photo or another portrait taken by a true professional. Andre Smith of Andre L Photography takes unbelievable sports photos. It doesn't matter the sport or the age of the athlete playing it. If you're looking for someone to capture your child playing sports to create memories that will last a lifetime, Andre is your man. A former photographer for the News Journal and other media outlets, he's got a passion for the art of sports photography. You can see his work at his website, AndreLphotography.com, and that L is spelled out EL. So it's AndreELphotography.com. Don't wait. Sports doesn't last forever for your kid, just like it didn't for us. And so make sure you capture those moments. Andre L Photography, that's EL, AndreLphotography.com is the man you want behind the camera when those pictures count. All right, let's move on to game 3 of the day. I was trying to figure out, Marty, how I would kick this to you without telling the whole story. So here's a couple points. It was 0-0 at the end of the first quarter. Smyrna was stopped on its first possession. Then they scored on 7 straight possessions. They were successful recovering 3 onside kicks by their special teams. And when I say onside, they have this little pooch kick that they do where they don't kick it deep, but they kick it so that if they don't get it, you still got 70 yards to go. Well, they got it 3 times. So that was the second point. The third point. The fourth point is they ended up winning 52-7, which is the largest margin of victory ever. The previous record was 42 when Hodson scored the record total amount of points, which was 54 when they beat Middletown 54-31 back in, I want to say 2000.
Well, actually, that was the most points.
That's margin, what I'm saying. Yeah, the most points.
Yeah, the margin was Hodgson again when they beat, I think it was St. George's 42-0 in 2014.
Oh, back in Division One.
Yeah,
Division Two. Back in Division Two.
I just combined all of them together.
Gotcha. Okay.
So,
this was for class. I should have clarified that. This was for the old Division One.
You're right.
And what is now Class 3. But you are right. That is so. So we're both right for a change. Usually it's you. That's right. So anyway, so a lot of points scored. A lot of points scored. And, you can look on Twitter and see some people were wondering why so many points were scored by Smyrna at the end. We're not going to get into that. No. They won their 4th state title. They won 3 in a row back in 2015, 16, and 70. Mike Judy defeats his alma mater. He was a center for the Dover Senators way back when. And he also defeats his former assistant coach at Wesley College, where Mike Judy was the center and one of the captains. So congratulations to Mike Judy and the Senators. Some of you might recall Mike was not on the sidelines early in the season, missed a couple games for health-related issues. And when he came back, they sort of went on a roll. And, of course, we've talked about all season long how it was the maturity of Brian Wright, which turned this team from being one of the top 4 teams in Delaware to, as I've said all season long, and I think you've agreed, is the top team in Delaware. And 2, 3, 4, and 5 are a big leap from them. And I think they proved that yesterday.
Absolutely. This was, and if you're Dover, you saw this movie earlier in the season. It was 14-14 at the end of the first quarter. In the first time they played, and then Smyrna scored the next 5 touchdowns. And as you said here, they scored on their next 7 possessions. So it was, the thing that stood out to me right off the bat was when Jaquan Kilby came out in street clothes. You kind of thought, oh boy, here we go. Their biggest offensive weapon all season long, and he wasn't able to go. And that really hurt. And I know Tyron Abrams it does a really nice job as a fill-in. He did a great job in the playoffs for them. He was held to 20 yards yesterday. Overall, the Smyrna defense held them to 24 carries for 39 yards on the ground, Dover, which is just incredible. Dover has a high-powered offense with Parker and Cosme. They completely shut that down. Cosme, 6 of 10, 60 yards, all of it to Parker, including the touchdown, which it was only 12-7. Because Smyrna missed their first 2 2-point conversions. So it looked like it might be a game there for a while. And then, boy, Brian Wright was just on fire yesterday. And 2 of the guys that I love that don't get a lot of press is Nolan Fretz, the wide receiver. 6 catches, 99 yards and a touchdown.
One lane flat on his back on the sideline.
God,
I don't know if you saw that or not.
If you're on Twitter, there's and I can't remember where it is, but someone has posted it. It's a phenomenal catch where, literally he's 2 inches from falling back on the sideline when he makes this catch. He was great. They could not cover him at all. And the other guy was the kicker, Josh Michael. I mean, first of all, who knew they had a kicker? Obviously, they do kick off, but
they kick off more than any team in the state.
Yes,
but that's
clearly the special teams coach at Smyrna saw something on film because Josh Michael expertly hit that open spot every single time. Now, there was one time he did drill one off a Dover defender, which he recovered himself off a Dover kickoff team member. So I thought those 2 guys were phenomenal. And again, I put out on Twitter yesterday, I said, raise your hand if you thought Josh Michael would be one of the co-MVPs of this game. First of all, did you even know they had a kicker?
Right.
Brian Wright, 16 of 24, 226 yards, 2 touchdowns. I tweeted too that in the semifinals, when they sort of more went with the earthquake and with the Wildcat with Ymir Knight and Gway, Wright was 0 for 3 with an interception in the semifinals. And then he comes out again. And I said it last week. I mean, Mike Marks knows exactly what he's doing with these kids. He's tailoring these game plans. I mean, his game plan yesterday was just basically, let's take every single phenomenal athlete we have and feed them the ball as equally as we can.
Mm-hmm.
And Dover had no answer for it.
No.
Markel Holman, 14 carries, 113 yards, 2 touchdowns. Knight threw for a touchdown, ran for 2, caught 1. I know he threw for a 2-point conversion, handed off for a 2-point conversion, and I think he ran for a 2-point conversion. So he basically, I tweeted Twitter Phil this morning, and I said the only thing he didn't do was work the concession stand during halftime. The kid did everything and really stamped his place as the top player in Delaware this season, as far as an overall all-around offensive player. The defense for Smyrna, again, they're just they've been phenomenal all season. You got Brandon West, Nazir Jenkins, Cole Moyer, and Robert Durnall combined for 27 tackles, a sack, 5 tackles for loss. It was just, they hit them with everything. You know, Ymir Knight, 4 catches, 71 yards. Holman, 2 catches for 57 yards. Guay, 2 catches for 20 yards, and another touchdown. So, or excuse me, Guay didn't have the touchdown. It was Holman. But they just used every weapon they had, and their defense was phenomenal. They are so far and above the best team in Delaware this season. And, you know, congratulations to Chip Knapp and his bunch for getting this far.
Yeah.
You know, I got a bunch of questions on Twitter about reseeding the tournament, and who knows, that may be coming at some point. I don't think it would have mattered this year.
No.
I don't care who they played.
Nope.
You know, they beat Middletown 48-0 in the semifinals.
Right. Yeah.
So
who's going to beat Smyrna? That's
exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, their performance throughout the season and the playoffs, and, you know, I kind of got beat up early in the season over them not having an identity, but I'll stick by that, because through the first 2 games of the season, we couldn't tell what they were going to be. Brian Wright wasn't playing well. Then he wasn't playing at all.
And then Judy went out.
Judy went out. Markel Holman was still getting situated in the offense. Yep. And all of a sudden, Mike Marks got all these pieces like across, you know, like a jigsaw puzzle, started putting them all together, and then bang, all of a sudden they were just unstoppable. Yep. And you said nobody's going to beat this team the rest of the season, and nobody did. And really nobody came close. And, you know, Dover hung in for as long as they could, but just way, way too many weapons on that, on the Eagles side of the field. So congratulations to Mike Judy, his staff. Again, I don't know, I wish I knew who the special teams coordinator was, but a fantastic job of game planning for this all around.
Smyrna also avoided what you need to avoid to win a state championship, especially in the fashion that they did, which is the injury bug. I mean, I don't believe anybody significant missed a game. And you know what? It probably wouldn't have mattered as long as it wasn't multiple people. There were people ready to step up. We talked about that the 4 wide receivers that line up would be the stars on most other teams in the state of Delaware. Right. Same with their backfield, same with their defensive people. And that's why they won so convincingly. So for Dover, they started out with a win, the famous win at Arundel, or with a loss, famous loss at Arundel year after year, which then puts them on a winning streak, which they had, which was 5 wins in a row, but they lost 3 out of their last 4. Lost to Sussex Central, lost to Smyrna, beat William Penn, and lost to Sally's. And so they struggled. And that's, you know, there are a lot of people were talking about Dover early in the season as being one of the top 2 or 3 teams. That criteria kind of fell down a little bit, or that reputation fell down a little bit with those losses. And so they battled to get back where they were. And so hats off to Chip Knapp. You know, all you can hope is that he stays with that program. Yeah. And that he, you know, doesn't want to go into retirement at this point. And Dover should hope that a lot. They've struggled with their last several coaches that they've had. They've gone through some coaches, and he's done, without question, the best job on that sideline as anyone. Since I've been starting to cover football. So
I actually thought, believe it or not, that one of my thoughts was the Del State job is still open.
Yeah.
And, you know, you got guys like Chip Knapp who have been at the college level for a while. Now, I know Division I is different than D3, but, you know, you never know what's going to happen in Delaware. No. Delaware State is not the most attractive job in the world, which is surprising me that they fired Milstead. But yeah, you just never know what's going to happen. But I'm with you. I think Chip Knapp, if he stays with this program, these guys are going to be top 3 in 3A for the next 10 years at least.
Could be a coaching swap. I understand Rod Milstead's looking to coach high school football here in the state of Delaware.
Really?
Yeah. So that's another aside. We'll talk about it another time. But anyway, we'll interesting to see. And hopefully, like I said, for the Senator's sake, Chip Knapp, and for Dover High School football's sake, that Chip Knapp stays right at Dover High School. All right, let's go on to Class 2. The final game of the night started on time. There's not one person who would have not lost money on that bet, whether that game was going to kick off at 6 o'clock or not. So again, hats off to the football committee led by Jim Comegys, to DIAA led by Donna Polk and Jed Bell, for a great day getting through
Smyrna
it.
helped out with the running clock a bit.
They
too,
did help out. You got to give. They made up for the unified game, costing them.
That's
half an hour
exactly
with
where
the
I was going with
overtime.
that.
So, anyway, so the Wake Forest Caravel game, we said if there was one game we could only watch one, that would be the one. And it turned out to be the best. You know, got the Caravel offense, which seemed to average 50 points a game.
Yeah.
I know it wasn't 50 they averaged, but they just were an offensive powerhouse. And you can argue all you want about their schedule. They were given a schedule in that class, in that division 3 of the Class 2, and they've since been moved to the Division 1. So that'll change next year. More on that in a minute. But anyway, regardless, they were a high-powered offense. Wake Forest, a defense that we knew Caravel had not seen at that point, not only literally, but figuratively. At the end of the first quarter, it was 7-0 Wake Forest. Tattersall found Ishmael Dobson on a touchdown pass, a little flare out into the end zone. Dobson's huge. He's got to be the second biggest kid in the state to Elijah Husser of Apo. Dobson is 6'6", 240 pounds. And then in the second quarter, Wake Forest puts together a long drive, and it ends in a 29-yard field goal by Alessio Cristinetti Walker. And how appropriate, Marty, in this season we've had of tremendous kickers, more consistent good kickers than we've ever seen in the last, since I've been doing this, which is 15 years. That would end up being the game-winning field goal, because at halftime it was 10-0. Tattersall had 81 passing yards, 79 rushing yards, which is exactly as you would have expected. The yardage difference, a key, 174 yards of offense at the half for Wilmington Friends, just 55 for Caravel. It was the Caravel defense that kept them in this game. A couple of key stops on 4th and short or 3rd and longs. Otherwise, that game would have been a blowout. Then in the fourth quarter, 7:23 to play. Caravel has a 4th and 14 on the Wilmington Friends. WF. That's why I came up with Wake Forest there. Wilmington Friends 22. And they get a first down and goal on the 6. Miller scores on the 6-yard run to make it 10-7. The Caravel defense comes up big again, forces Wilmington Friends to punt. They do, down to their 7-yard line. So 93 yards that Caravel has to go. Unfortunately for them, Andrew McKenzie picks off a pass, and that seals it for them. But the storyline of this game, Marty, there were 3 generations on the field. There was Grandpa Tattersall Bob, the all-time winningest coach in the state of Delaware. His son, Robbie, who coached under him for years, has taken over the program officially as the head coach. Bob is still on the sideline as a consultant. And then, of course, there's the 2 grandsons. There's Robbie Tattersall, heading to Yale next year. Ironically, as a wide receiver, a position I don't think he played one time at Wilmington Friends. He's a do-it-all. He can punt. He can play defense. He can throw the ball. He can run the ball. I'm sure he can catch the ball. And then the other grandson, Ryan, who I believe is a sophomore, so will be around for the next 2 years. I know he's not a senior. Here was my favorite line from Bob Tattersall Sr. explaining his role with the team. He says, "I'm like an insurance policy.
I love it.
There if you need me, but you never want to have to use me." And I thought that was funny.
I thought that was great.
I think it was whoever was covering it for the News Journal is where I saw that. It was either Brad Myers or Kevin Tressolini. So I thought that was a great line. And just, what a great story. It's a great story if they lose. It's a better story when they win. They haven't won the state championship since 1984. Bob Tattersall was young and probably thinking, I'll do this for about 10 years. And here we are. So congratulations to the Tattersall clan. And of course, everyone else. Robbie Tattersall, as you would expect in his interview after the game, he gave credit to everybody but himself. And that's what that team is all about.
This was again a game dominated by Tattersall and his line, the offensive line. The time of possession was basically 31 minutes to 17 minutes. That Caravel defense was on the field a lot. Friends ran 58 plays. 49 of them were Rob Tattersall either running or throwing the football. So it's so funny. You look at Friends and you think, they're easy to stop. All you got to stop is number 17. Once you stop him, the game's over. No one can do it.
No.
And there's a good reason. It's not just him, who's a phenomenal player. That offensive line all season. And if someone out there sends me the names on Twitter, I'd love to to put their names all out there. I don't have the starting five, but I wish I definitely put them out there for recognition. Those kids were incredible. The defense was incredible. I mean, Caravel, as you said, has racked up points all season. They had 411 yards of offense in the semifinals last week, 205 versus Friends, and a lot of that came when they were scrambling in the third and fourth quarter. But once it got to 10-0, I thought, okay, Friends is going to methodically add score after score after score. The Caravel defense rose up, just like St. Elizabeth's did against Laurel. I thought Truman Awerda, let me go back a second. I kept waiting for Caravel to make an adjustment.
Yeah.
They could not run the football, but they wouldn't throw the football consistently either. And I kept thinking, all right, halftime's over. They're going to come out. They're going to throw the football. They're going to make some big adjustments. They never really did. They got the 4th and 14 conversion, which was incredible. And I'm sure that shocked the heck out of Friends.
Yeah.
And then they get the touchdown. And boy, when they stopped Friends, I'm thinking, holy smokes, Caravel is right where they want to be. And then they get down at the 7-yard line.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh boy, this is not going to happen. And then of course a word is picked off. And that's just one of those situations. They're laying back, waiting for these passes at that point anyway. I was impressed with the amount of time they were able to control the football. Again, 31-17 throughout the game. But in the third quarter, this was what really got me. In the third quarter, Friends ran 10 plays. They gained 15 yards. Those 15 yards, they managed to eat up 5 minutes and 28 seconds of clock. It's just incredible what they were able to do at times to keep Caravel off of the field. And
that's why they have the quarterback run over to the coach, Marty. So they can kill more time. That's why they're coaching, and you and I are on the podcast.
I was watching with my mom, and my mom kept saying, "Why does he keep running over to the sideline for every play?"
Doesn't she listen to the podcast?
Don't get me started. That's what I said. I said, "Yeah, thanks for listening. Don't get me started on that one." But I said the kid never leaves the field. And she's like, "Is number 17? Is he punting too?" I'm like, "Oh God, he does everything for this team, Mom, except the field goal kicking, which is held by a guy who's phenomenal, Leslie Christianetti Walker." But this was I came in averaging Caravel 180 rush yards per game. They were held to 33 rushing yards yesterday. Bryce McKinnon, Makai Carmen, and Brock Rhodes on the defense combined for 32 tackles. I thought, again, the Caravel defense did a great job. It was a case where the defense, boy, if you were on the defense, you had to keep every possession saying, guys, you got to get us some yards here, or at least some first downs. Because it had to be exhausting. And there were some timeouts when you could see the Caravel kids coming over to the side, and they just looked drained. And let's face it, you got a 6'5", 200 and whatever pound Robbie Tattersall is blasting into you 30 times a game. It's going to take its toll regardless of how tough you are on the defensive side. So, what I loved about Friends in this case, and it reminded me of the old Mark Del Percio quote when he was with Middletown, and he said, we don't game plan for other people. We game plan for us. And if we execute what we're doing, no one can beat us. Robbie Tattersall did the exact same thing yesterday. They didn't change a thing.
Nope.
They ran their exact offense. They played the same defense, and they couldn't be stopped. It was just, they wanted to make the other team make the adjustments. Caravel wasn't able to make the adjustments they needed to. And it was a really good, hard fought game. I mean, there were times during it where it was kind of a slog where you're like, oh God, somebody please do something. But Friends seemed very content to build up this time advantage, the time of possession, and then punt the ball, and it became kind of a field position type of game. So credit all the way around. Caravel, a phenomenal season. They just ran into a team. It just something about this Friends team. And I said this when I picked them last week, was there's just something magic about this Friends team with Tattersall and the 3 generations. And what a great story. A 10-7 game. We have 2 games that sort of went down to the wire, St. Elizabeth's and Laurel too. And then the one in the blowout in the middle, which probably 99% of the people predicted. But overall, just a great Saturday. And again, starting off with the unified game with the overtime, just a fantastic Saturday. And as you said, the weather looked great. No excuses from anyone about anything.
Mm-mm.
I thought the games were officiated well.
Yep.
I mean,
Wasn't
there were
wasn't a story in any game where it
no, it
was
wasn't.
officials.
Officials in the Smyrna game, there were a couple of early personal fouls. They got handled very quickly.
Mhm.
And I think that the tone was set that we're not going to stand for this kind of stuff.
Right.
And, again, just a great overall day. So props to the DIAA, Jim Comegys and his committee. A great job again. And yeah, it was just a fun Saturday.
Yeah, it really was. And congratulations, of course, to all 4 winners and
Yep.
the 4 runner-ups and everybody who made the tournament. Your goal when you start a season is to make the tournament, because
That's
you
right.
can't win a state championship, which is the ultimate goal, if you don't make the tournament. And so teams should be proud of themselves, whether they got knocked out in the first round, got knocked out yesterday, or won a state championship. Everybody should feel good about that. It's the type of memory that you'll take with you forever.
Absolutely.
I can't tell you the records of my high school teams I played on. I can tell you the years we made it to the playoffs, even if I can't remember whether we won or lost.
Right.
Anyway, we lost every time and we never got to a state championship, but I can't tell you who we might have lost to or how it happened. But I remember
Right.
the years that we made the playoffs and the years that we didn't. So that puts a wrap on 2022. We're going to talk about realignment for 2023 and 24. But before we do, remember, if you're looking to buy or sell your house, Mary Kate Johnson can help you do it as if it was your own. She's an award-winning realtor with 20 years of experience. She helped my wife and I sell our old house, buy our new one, still gives us recommendations along the way for refinancing and stuff like that. We recommended her to dozens of friends who in turn recommended her to dozens of their friends. In fact, we still learn about people. Yeah, I used your real estate agent and that type of thing. So a great person. You might think you understand the real estate market. It's usually either up, down, or in the middle. She understands it from both sides, whether you're buying or selling. So whether it's your first home, someone else's, your sons, your daughters, your parents, whatever. If they're looking for a real estate agent, check out Mary Kate's reviews on Zillow. You can do that at her website, marykatej.remax.com. That's marykatej.remax.com. That's Mary Kate Johnson of Remax Associates. She'll sell your home as if it was her own. All right, realignment. I want to congratulate Dave Collins and the committee that did this. It's a no-win situation. 11 teams asked to move. Only one of them, Odessa, asked to move up. And so that basically means if you got moved, unless you were Odessa, you probably weren't thrilled about it. And that's just the way it was going to be. So I'm going to go. Let's start with Class 3, Marty, just because it's at the top of my list here. It makes things simple. St. Mark's was moved up. St. George's was moved from District 1 to District 2. Not a big deal for St. George's, especially because John Wilson, just like Bill DiNardo at Sally's, they did what I said everybody should have been doing for those 2 years. They played everybody else in their class. And so it's not like all of a sudden St. George's is going to be, oh gosh, we have to play Smyrna. They played Smyrna the past 2 years. And so that was just the way it is. So simple move for John Wilson and his staff and his team over to District 2 in Class 3. St. Mark's, a different story. Again, they didn't ask to move up. If you were on the call, the athletic director, Matt Smith, who's also on the DIAA board, was pretty adamant that they should not have to move up. Statistics said otherwise, and I don't have them in front of me. Maybe you do, Marty, but basically
there were 4 teams it came down to. It was Newark, Howard, St. Mark's, and Sussex Tech with a 4 that based on that 50-50 plan, they were going to choose from those 4 teams. And from those 4, St. Mark's had the highest winning percentage, the largest roster size, the most playoff victories, and head-to-head wins over Newark and Howard on their resume, in addition to a win over the Class 3A District 1 champion to open this season.
Right.
So the argument against St. Mark's was sort of flimsy to not move them up. So
compared to the
I
others.
understand Matt Smith, but
yeah, he's fighting for his team, fighting for his program.
He did.
I saw all these teams play. Marty, if Newark moves up, they don't win a game for the next 2 years. That's just, and I like Newark. I cover Newark for the Newark Post. I like Jody Russell. I love what he's done with the program. He's done with the program all he can do in Class 2. He'd be the first to tell you there's no way we compete in Class 3. Not only compete, it'd be running clocks for at least half those teams. That's just the reality of it. And Newark's a very good, very solid Class 2 team. They are the epitome of why they went to this system, because they had very little success the last several years in Division 1, and now they're in Class. They're where they belong. I didn't see Sussex Tech enough to give an argument one way or another. I think they have the school size maybe more so than a Howard. And I still think Howard is a year-to-year thing. They went from 2 state titles to barely making the playoffs, and they needed help to do that. And this year getting knocked out. And so but I saw St. Mark's beat Appoquinimink, who went on to win Class 3. And I've seen St. Mark's up close, size-wise. There's as many kids on that sideline as there is in the other Class 3 schools, maybe with the exception of Middletown and Smyrna.
And they've got a lot of returning talent next year. Yeah. So I talked to some parents and said, look, I truly expect St. Mark's to either, if not qualify, to be in contention for a playoff spot up until the very end next year.
Yep.
Are they going to beat Salesianum? No. But who cares? You know, you don't have to beat Salesianum in the regular season.
They did in the last few years before
exactly, which is why that ended.
Right.
Yeah.
It was like the Route 1 rivalry.
So Delaware, it was funny. This really caught St. Mark's parents off guard.
Yeah.
So I got a bunch of messages saying, what in the world happened at this meeting? And I know that Matt Smith tried to go the Howard route with where, hey, you guys were going to move Howard up 2 years ago, and then the superintendents got involved, and that was met with crickets.
Yeah.
Which to me suggested that either the superintendents were well aware of Dave's current plan and didn't have any problem with it. That's probably what happened in my mind, was it because, and I'll give credit to Dave, and I sent him a note. He was so prepared for this. I mean, his presentation was perfect and on point, and then he was ready for every question anyone threw at him. And I mean, we get, again, some ridiculous questions. I mean, people wanted to know, well, why is Laurel moving up and not Wilmington Charter? And you're like, oh my God, what are these people watching football in Delaware, or are they just throwing out whatever? But
why can't the 35 guys on Wilmington Friends sideline play in Class 3?
Oh my God, yes.
Or whatever.
Why isn't Archmere moving up? Why isn't? I mean, my goodness. So anyway, Dave and his staff did a phenomenal job, and it ended up with St. Mark's going. And again, this is a 2-year thing. They're going to reevaluate in 2 years. So if you're a St. Mark's fan, you're not happy with it, you got to live with it for 2 years. After that, who knows what's going to happen?
So, all right. So that's Class 3. Class 2, a little less controversial. Odessa, the only team that asked to move up, they're obviously going to be, I would think they're going to be in Class 3 after the next 2-year cycle.
Agree.
Certainly by the next 4 years.
They're going to have 1,500 kids within the next 2 years.
Right.
They're going to be up in Class 3. Yeah.
Yep. So they'll be in Class 2 in District 2, where they'll play Archmere, Howard, Mount Pleasant, Tower Hill, and Friends. That might be the most competitive division, just taking a quick look.
And by the way, they added Middletown and Appo to their schedule for next year.
Yeah.
So these guys are all in.
Yeah. Yep. And that's how you get better.
Look,
exactly guys, this is where we're headed. So this is what we got to do.
Agreed.
Caravel and Red Lion moved districts within. And so it makes their schedule friendlier. They're not going downstate to play 80% of their games, or at least it felt that way. And not even just downstate, but way downstate. So District 1 now in Class 2 is Caravel, Concord, Del Castle, DMA, Newark, and Red Lion. Marty, quick look at that. Caravel and Red Lion could now be the favorites in that district, but again, we don't know. We didn't want to spend today looking at next year, because with transfers and all that, we have no clue what's going on, other than certain people are leaving, that type of thing. But that's going to be a competitive district too, and again, that's what they're trying to do.
That is, I agree, Caravel, and we know Red Lion is the one team. They're loaded with freshmen.
Loaded.
And they had a really good season. So I expect them to jump in and compete right away for one of the top spots there. Yeah, we don't know what's coming back with DMA. Caravel, we know, is going to lose some big talent. But yeah, I look at this, and I look at District 2, and I think that's going to be a really competitive division.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what they're looking for. And I wanted to point this out real quick too. The people asking about why they changed, this stat just blew me away. Dave mentioned this at the beginning of the meeting. In 2021, 48% of the games were decided by 4 or more touchdowns in Delaware high school football. And this year that jumped to 58%. That's insane. So something had to be done, and they had to make some moves, and I love what they've done so far.
And part of that percentage in the statistic is because we still have schools, right, wrong, or indifferent, playing out of class to uphold rivalries.
Right.
And a rivalry is not when you get running clocked midway through the third quarter. That does not define a rivalry. And so there's always going to be a skew in those statistics as long as teams continue to play out of class, whether it's up or down.
Yep.
And so that's just the reality of it. If you play in your class and you have to play in your district and you limit it to that, then I think that number starts coming down. But
And, I do think too that you have, and I hate to single these teams out, but you do have like the early college school down
Right.
at Dell State.
Yep.
You have First State Military Academy. They're
Yeah.
losing by 40 and 50 points every week to these teams. So it does skew it a bit. And you can't move those teams down anywhere.
No.
But so yeah, there are some other reasons, like you said, as to why that number is so big.
And remember, they play 10 games.
Yes.
So that if that, if they're getting beat by 4 touchdowns, 6 or 7 games, all of a sudden, like you said,
that's a big number that gets factored in. Yes.
Right. All right. So last class is Class 1. They welcome AI DuPont and McCain. AI DuPont did not field a program this year. They had to cut their season short the year before. That was a no-brainer to move them down. McCain moves down. Would they win 1 game 2 years ago? This year they got off to a good start and then floundered from there, and so they moved down. So that makes that district the District 1 in Class 1A is AI DuPont, Christiana, Dickinson, Glasgow, McCain, St. Elizabeth, Tatnall, Wilmington Charter. Wilmington Charter, of course, had a great season. Again, not sure what's coming back, but maybe if you take St. Elizabeth out of that equation and Wilmington Charter, Marty, that could be a real competitive district.
Absolutely, I agree.
Go ahead.
No, I just want to say you had the teams that moved down, and Dave specified this during the meeting, was that these were either 0 or 1 or 2 win teams, or teams that couldn't finish their season because of roster concerns, like AI DuPont. So these were guys, and I know some of the questions from the committee was, well, why not Del Castle? Well, first of all, Del Castle had a really competitive season last year. Del Castle didn't win a game this year, but if you look at their schedule, they were right there in a number of games. And I've said before, Kerry Galloway, what he's done with that program is pretty impressive based on who they have to play. Del Castle's not going to, they may have wanted to move down, but they're not going to let them do it because they were competitive in a lot of games. They do have a big school enrollment. So these teams that are moved down, they were moved down specifically for reasons that, a lot of it was safety, to be honest with you. I mean, with these roster sizes and things like that, you can't have these teams competing with some of the bigger teams in the state.
And a lot of it is to avoid football programs, folding completely. If you're heading to AI and you're thinking about playing football and you're thinking, well, I'm going to play in that Class 2A again, we're not going to win a game, we might not finish the season. You're not even going to go after the team.
No, remember Wilmington Charter was in this conundrum, 5 years ago. Right. First of all, when they moved down from Flight A, and then it was, we're still getting killed. Is it even worth it to have a football program? And then bang, you move to this 3-class system, and Wilmington Charter is a huge success story for the system. So yeah, I agree. A lot of this is done to try to keep these programs intact and give these kids who have just been beaten over the head for years and years a chance to compete with schools on their level. Yeah.
And a lot of arguments were made for some of the teams that requested to go down in Class 3, knowing if we don't start winning, not winning state championships, winning period, kids are not going to choose to come to our school to play football. They're going to look elsewhere. And even if it means they go Class 2 to try to win a state championship, we're going to lose top players. And so I get the argument, but the reality of it is there's got to be 3 classes and somebody's got to play in all 3 of the classes. And you can't play Class 3 with 4 teams.
That's right.
Or 5 teams, that you just can't do that.
And we should point out, go ahead. I'm sorry. Let you finish up the
so the final class, District 2, Brandywine moves down and Conrad moves down. Same thing. Couple
exactly.
Wins, not going to win in class 2, just not going to do it.
And we should point out too that they did, and this was kind of lost in the shuffle a bit, but they did approve a new playoff plan too. Now all 3 divisions will only have 8 teams make the playoffs. Right. So we're not going to have that bye week for the 1A and 3A teams anymore. And hopefully, and I know this was part of the plan, these kids that are missing basketball season will not have to do that as much next year. I know Caravel's missing 2 or 3 kids from their program as they get into the championship game yesterday. And it's better anyway. You have those teams in 2A. There's so many blowouts again in the first round. 8 teams for each division is perfect. Let's play 3 straight weekends of games, and that's it. The 12 was just too many.
And if you don't make the top 8, don't complain. Get there next year. I mean, 8 for the number of teams in Delaware. 8 is, if you can't make the top 8, you're probably not winning the state championship.
Yeah, we got 24 of 40 some odd teams are making the playoffs. So not a lot to complain about.
Yeah. All right. So that puts a cap on this season's podcast. Now, what our plan is when there is news, we're going to have a podcast, and we may mix it up. Also, if there's a coach hiring, we may not only get on and talk about the coach, maybe we'll have him on the broadcast to talk about his new job type of thing. So we don't want to become white noise. And the reality of it is the Delaware high school football season is over for 2022. It was a great season. We loved the listenership that we had. We averaged more than 1,000 people listening a week, which we just thought was incredible. Our goal, I think, Marty, we would have been happy with 200 when we started this out. 200 consistent listeners,
and we hit 2,000 a week ago, I think, in the semifinal weekend. So
a lot of different, and that's just what we can somewhat measure. They they say the thing with podcasting is you're really never going to know how many people you have listening. But the other big thrill for us is we know, based on our social media comments, direct messages to us, we have coaches listening, we have athletic directors listening, we have parents listening, we have kids listening. So we have every facet of the Delaware high school football, and we have fellow media members listening, as we do to their stuff.
Love it.
So we have every facet of Delaware high school football fans, players, coaches, parents, anybody who has interest in it, they're tuning into the podcast, whether it's every single week or just when they know we're talking about something they're interested in. So we want to thank the listeners for that, because without you, if there's 10 people listening to us, we don't get excited about it, and we probably don't keep the podcast going. But we're already looking forward to next year. And like I said, we're not going to wait till August 15th to podcast again. There will be Delaware high school news for us to talk about, for us to share with you. And along that line, keep in touch with us, please, because a lot of the news we get comes from our listeners. Again, we've heard from, we've used sources, and we always say we're never going to out our sources, but we're also not going to use sources that we're not sure about.
Exactly.
But we have listeners who are sources. We have coaches who are sources, athletic directors who are sources, all kinds of people who are sources, players as well. And we appreciate them. And so let us know if you have news. And, that's how we find out about stuff. You can communicate with us on Twitter. It's at DELHS Football. As many of you know, our Facebook page is the DELHS Football Pod, and we're also on Instagram now. And we did that just in case Twitter got sold.
That's right.
It went defunct, and it hasn't yet. But anyway, we hope you'll share this podcast with people and say, hey, these guys, you got to listen to them next year when they come back on. We would appreciate that. Marty, your last thoughts?
It was a great season. Again, I'm with you. I never expected the level of engagement that we get on a week-to-week basis. We love the amount of listeners we have, but like you said, again, that's we can't really tell how many exactly, but we get so much communication and engagement from people, like you said, school administrators, athletic directors, coaches, fans, players. It's been phenomenal. And almost overwhelmingly positive. And it's great when, like I said last week, when, Mike Marks kind of took a shot at me with a little emoji at something I said on the pod. We love that stuff, right? Because they're listening, and it's great. And hey, you and I, we own up to it anytime we make a mistake, or anytime we say something wrong, we own up to it. So it's been a great experience. And I'm sad to see this season end, because it was fantastic. But like you said, it won't be till August when we're back. There'll be a lot of stuff to talk about at different times over the course of the year.
We'll be back, and we've got some ideas that we think is going to make the listening experience even better for people next year. And if you are interested in advertising on the podcast to support youth sports, please let us know. We are we have a very friendly package price-wise for people. And so we would love to have you on board to help us continue to promote Delaware high school football. We're the only podcast that is exclusive to Delaware high school football. A lot of other good stuff out there that covers sports year round, a lot of good broadcasters, writers, other people who do the same thing we do. They just do it on a broader basis. But we felt that our niche would be to focus on Delaware high school football, and it seems to have worked. And we appreciate all of you for making that happen. So for one final time here in 2022, it's not have a great sports week. It's have a great sports weeks or months or whatever. But we promise we'll be back before you probably think so. Have a great week.